History has many monsters, but none as enduring as the man who turned blood into a legend. Deep within the jagged peaks of the Carpathian Mountains, shrouded in a fog that never seems to lift, lies a story that has been distorted by time, movies, and nightmares. We know him as Dracula, the vampire who sleeps in a coffin and fears the sun. But the real man was far more terrifying than any creature of the night. He was Vlad III, a prince who ruled with a blade so sharp and a heart so cold that even empires trembled at his shadow. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a journey into the dark soul of the 15th century. To understand the man, we must look at the name. Vlad was born in the winter of 1431 in the fortress of Sigishora. His father, Vlad II, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a secret, elite brotherhood of knights sworn to a single holy mission: to stop the Islamic Ottoman Empire from swallowing Christian Europe. Because of this, his father took the name Dracul, the dragon. In the language of the time, young Vlad became Dracula, literally the son of the dragon. But as history would soon witness, the dragon can easily be mistaken for the devil. The world Vlad was born into was a slaughterhouse. Wallachia, his homeland, was a tiny strip of land caught between two titans, the Kingdom of Hungary and the massive Ottoman Empire. Survival didn't come from diplomacy, it came from betrayal. In 1442, at the age of just 11, Vlad's life changed forever. To prove his loyalty to the Ottoman Sultan, Vlad's father did the unthinkable. He handed over his two sons, Vlad and Radu, as political hostages. Imagine the psychological toll on a young prince. One day you are royalty, the next you are a prisoner in a foreign land surrounded by people who hate your faith and your family. While his younger brother Radu surrendered to the Ottoman lifestyle, becoming a favorite of the Sultan's court, Vlad did the opposite. He became a stone. He watched, he learned, he observed the Ottoman methods of psychological warfare, their absolute discipline, and their most brutal punishment, impalement. He saw how fear could keep an entire continent in check. Little did the Ottomans know, they weren't just holding a hostage, they were training the very man who would one day turn their own cruelty against them. This was the forge where the Impaler was born. In 1448, Vlad finally returned to Wallachia, but the boy who left was gone. In his place stood a man with eyes that had seen too much. He found his father murdered, beaten to death by his own noblemen, the boyars. His older brother, Mircea, had suffered an even worse fate. He was blinded with red-hot irons and buried alive. The very people who were supposed to protect his family had butchered them for power. Vlad didn't just want the throne, he wanted a reckoning. But a prince without an army is just a target. Vlad spent years in exile, moving between courts, waiting for the perfect moment. In 1456, he finally seized his crown. But he inherited a broken nation. Wallachia was a den of thieves, corrupt nobles, and lawless peasants. Vlad realized that to save his country, he had to break it first. He didn't believe in rehabilitation, he believed in the ultimate deterrent. His first act of justice is the stuff of nightmares. It was Easter Sunday, 1457. Vlad invited the powerful boyar families to a grand feast at his palace in Târgoviște. They came dressed in their finest robes, expecting a night of wine and political favors. But as the meat was served, Vlad's tone changed. He asked them, "How many princes have you seen rule this land?" Some replied 7, some 30. Vlad sneered. Their constant betrayals and switching of loyalties were the reason Wallachia was weak. The guards surrounded the hall. The older, frail nobles were impaled on the spot, the stakes driven slowly through their bodies so they would die over days of agony. The younger ones and their families were forced into a death march into the mountains. Without tools, without rest, they were forced to build Poinari Castle on a jagged cliff. They worked until their clothes fell off, until their skin blistered, and until they dropped dead from the heights. Vlad watched from above. He had replaced the corrupt nobility with a new law, his law, and his law was written in blood. He was no longer just Vlad. He had become the boogeyman of the Balkans. As Vlad's power grew, so did his reputation for a terrifying kind of order. There is a famous story that historians still debate. Vlad reportedly placed a cup made of solid, pure gold by a public fountain in the center of the capital. He gave a simple decree. Anyone could drink from it, but the cup must never leave the fountain. For his entire reign, in a city that was once filled with crime, that gold cup stayed there. No one touched it. Why? Because the price of theft wasn't a fine or a prison cell. It was the stake. Vlad's obsession with impalement wasn't just madness, it was a calculated tool of statecraft. He impaled the lazy, the dishonest, and the unfaithful. To Vlad, a lie was as bad as a murder. He once invited all the beggars, the sick, and the poor of the city to a massive hall for a free meal. He fed them until they were full, then asked, "Do you want to be without cares? Do you want for nothing in this world?" They cheered. Vlad stepped out, locked the doors from the outside, and set the building on fire. He claimed he was cleaning the city of the burden of poverty. But his greatest enemy was still watching from the east. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, finally lost his patience with the defiant Wallachian prince. When the Sultan sent envoys to demand tribute, gold and children for the Ottoman army, Vlad met them with a cold smile. The envoys refused to remove their turbans, citing religious tradition. Vlad replied, "I wish to strengthen your tradition," and ordered his guards to nail the turbans to their heads with iron spikes. This was an act of total war. The Sultan gathered an army of 100,000 soldiers, the most powerful war machine on earth, and marched toward Wallachia. Against them, Vlad had barely 30,000 men, mostly farmers and peasants. But Vlad knew something the Sultan didn't. You don't need a bigger army if you can destroy the enemy's mind. He began a campaign of scorched earth. He burned his own crops, poisoned his own wells, and killed his own livestock. He wanted the Ottoman army to starve in a wasteland of their own making. He was inviting them into his trap. June 17th, 1462. The Ottoman army was camped outside the capital, Targoviste. They were tired, thirsty, and nervous. In the middle of the night, a shadow moved through the camp. It was Vlad himself, disguised as an Ottoman soldier. Because he had been a hostage for years, he spoke perfect Turkish. He walked right past the guards, identified the Sultan's tent, and then vanished back into the woods. A few hours later, the night attack began. Vlad led a lightning-fast cavalry charge directly into the heart of the sleeping Ottoman camp. His target was the Sultan. The chaos was unimaginable. In the pitch black, the Ottomans began killing each other, unable to tell friend from foe. Vlad's men moved like demons, setting fire to tents and cutting down officers. Although they failed to kill the Sultan, who was protected by his elite janissaries, the psychological victory was absolute. The invincible Ottomans were now terrified to close their eyes. But the worst was yet to come. As the Sultan's army finally reached the gates of the capital the next morning, they expected a battle. Instead, they found silence. And then they saw it. Stretching for miles was the forest of the Impaled. Over 20,000 Ottoman prisoners and Bulgarian allies had been hoisted onto wooden stakes. The Sultan's own soldiers, his friends, his men, all dead in the most horrific way possible. The stakes were positioned so that the weight of the bodies would slowly drive the wood through them over days. The smell was so foul, the sight so overwhelming, that the great conqueror Mehmed II, the man who had crushed the Byzantine Empire, reportedly turned his horse around and retreated. He said, "We cannot win against a man who does such things." Vlad had done it. He had defeated the world's greatest superpower using nothing but sheer, unadulterated terror. But victory in Wallachia was always fleeting. His own brother, Radu, was sent by the Ottomans to replace him. Radu didn't use stakes, he used gold and promises. He turned the boyars against Vlad, claiming the prince was a madman. Vlad was forced into exile in Hungary, where he spent years in prison, allegedly spending his time impaling mice and birds to keep his skills sharp. His legend was growing, but his time was running out. In 1476, Vlad made one last desperate attempt to reclaim his throne. He succeeded for a few short months, but he was a man out of time. During a battle against the Ottomans near Bucharest, Vlad III fell. The details of his death are a mystery. Some say he was betrayed by his own soldiers. Others say he was accidentally killed by his own men who mistook him for an Ottoman in the chaos. The Sultan got his final revenge. Vlad's head was cut off, preserved in a jar of honey, and sent to Constantinople. It was displayed on a stake for all to see. The Impaler finally impaled. His body was said to be buried at Snagov Monastery, but when archaeologists opened the tomb centuries later, it was empty. The Prince of Wallachia had vanished into the earth. But Vlad didn't die in 1476. He was reborn in 1897, when an Irish author named Bram Stoker heard the stories of the son of the dragon who drank the blood of his enemies. Stoker took the name Dracula and created the world's most famous monster. But the fictional vampire, with his cape and fangs, is a shadow compared to the real Dracula. The real Dracula was a man of flesh and blood who believed that to save a kingdom, you must be willing to lose your soul. To some, he is a national hero, a protector who stood against the tide of an empire. To others, he is the definition of human evil. But in the misty graveyards of Transylvania, if you listen closely to the wind, you realize the truth. Vlad the Impaler proved that while bodies rot and empires fall, fear is eternal. He wasn't a vampire because he wanted to live forever. He became a monster so his people would never be forgotten. Thank you for joining us on this dark journey into the heart of history. I am your host, and this is GriotVibe. If you have the courage to hear more untold stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, keep your eyes in the shadows.